we would want to conceive of the universe as process, as creative, essentially creative, rather than as the universe as something created by a creator, so that you have a separation there, where the essence and the existence fail to coincide. Whitehead would want to actualize the infinite. And, Spinoza, I think, was attempting to do something similar with his monist philosophy. But he didn't fully actualize the infinite. He substantialized it, made it a potential. And, we can only experience the particular modes of this unactualized universal potential, that being nature itself, or God. Didn't matter for Spinoza. Whitehead still makes a distinction between God and the world, and concepts and percepts, the soul and the body. He will recognize the need to distinguish between mental and physical and so forth, but he won't separate the two, but rather conceive of them not as separate substances, but as poles or phases of a process of creativity that is, for Whitehead, it's atomized, or it individualizes itself. Realization is always individualization. For Whitehead, the individual is what is concrete. The universal and the particular are just as abstract. It's not, sometimes a nominalist, for example, would say that the universal is just an abstraction while the particular is real. But it's both the universal and the particular that are abstractions. What's real is the individual. What becomes actual is this concrete individualization where the many become one and are thereby increased by one. This continual sense of, you could say, lacking completion that we witness the universe always moving through, is creativity. And for Whitehead, creativity is the ultimate, not God or the world, not the creator or the creature, the immanent or the transcendent. What's ultimate for Whitehead is the in-between, the participation, the metaxy, you could say, as Plato would describe it, this go-between, this process of manifestation that allows ideas to incarnate or ingress, as Whitehead would say, into the world. That's what's real. Not either pole in and of itself, but the motion of one pole pulling the other through it. And our language can only inadequately describe this ultimate situation. So our attempts to characterize what is true of the universe and our experience of it, all of our attempts to linguistically describe this experience are going to be limited. And in that sense, they're going to have to be honest about the need to continue the conversation, about the open-endedness of the pursuit of truth. This, I think, is what it would take for our philosophy to avoid bifurcation or dualism, where nature and man, or subject and object, are conceived of as existing in isolation from one another, coming to meet one another as pre-existing entities, facing off, so to speak. Some sort of incommensurable difference between the two. I think this is a fallacy created by misplaced concreteness, to use Whitehead's phraseology. It's a misconceived problem, a question that should be unasked, you could say. The question we should be asking, isn't how did the material world create consciousness, but the question we should be asking is, what is the material world such that consciousness or life are possible? What is the universe such that the human being can know it? that's the question we should be asking. And it's an inversion of Kant's subjectivist revolution, where for Kant the subject provided a priori the categories which were going to determine the objective world as we experience it. So there's a movement from the subject outward in terms of the constitution, or in terms of the process that constructs our experience. It goes from subject to object. For Whitehead, there's an inversion of this where there's still a process of ongoing creative construction, and Kant realized this, but he said it was the subject. Whitehead says, no, the movement is opposite. It starts with the object, with the datum as it emerges in experience for the subject. And then the experience is completed by the subject's attempt to realize that manifold datum of experience as a discrete individual decision, or actualization of what it had experienced as real a moment before. So it goes from object to subject, and the powers or potentialities dormant in the object lead to the production of a subject. And so then when Whitehead tries to say, well, what is really behind the object that provides the power for the subject to become itself, and he ends in saying that this must be God, and that God must be envisaging the objective world so that it appears to the individual subject as relevant to its own desires, its own individual needs, and its own individual forms of enjoyment and decision. So it must be God that provides the universe capable of creating a consciousness that could know it as such. And it's a circularity, and it's kind of, Whitehead's is a metaphysics that's responding to the anthropic principle, which only emerges because we discover that the universe seems to have a history. It seems to have an evolutionary past, which is already determined and which has given rise to the forms of possibility now, today, available to us. And it's an attempt to reconcile our own true knowledge of this event called the universe with the fact that it is a historical process of evolution. The anthropic principle calls that situation into question, and it's only, I think inadequately solved by a sort of multiverse theory where the materialist preserves the randomness that they, through faith believe is at the root of nature, by saying that there is a random generator of universes with completely different physical constants, and that are not fine-tuned like this particular universe that we live in happens to be on accident. I think that's an inadequate theory because it's really no theory at all. It's an intellectual defeat and an admission of a defeat in the face of a chaos one failed to understand. If we're going to be scientific and practice theorized experiments and experimental theories, then we're going to have to do better than pure randomness as the explanation for the universe. And so Whitehead doesn't shy away from saying or from talking about God and God's relationship to the world. The Whitehead's God is not Spinoza's God. Whitehead's God is not the God of the Bible, certainly. It has more to do with the conception of ultimate reality in Buddhism than it does in the Jewish or Christian or Islamic traditions, you could say. I think Whitehead is also thinking within a Christian context, and so Christianity as a religion has certainly shaped his philosophical, the philosophical problems that he finds interesting, and his responses to those problems. But whatever we might mean when we talk about God, I think it pays